Hello everyone, this is part 1 of What If Deku Was the Chainsaw Man. This story is made by JustLow, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. A nauseating cacophony cleaves through her tympanum, shredding the eardrum. It's a sensory phenomena of chaotic sound that pierces her ears. The visceral noise is so jarring that it continues to ring in her ears even after they've been ruptured. She'll never forget the obstreperous fortissimo for as long as she lives. She'll always remember the wet warmth of a liquid touch when she tries cupping her ears in a futile attempt to muffle the pandemonium. She will forever see the crimson color of blood on her hands after holding them out in front of her to see why they had become so damp. The poor girl shall know better than anyone else what Hell's Gates sound like when they screech open for the devil to come out and play. Born with a quirk that grants her organic ear jacks, Kyoka Jiru earned her placement as one of UA's entrance examinees. The hero school candidate had rushed into the physical portion of the test filled with vim vigor. There had been a level of confidence only defined as young nativity. She was all ears when listening to the rules, so she had expected taking out mechanical foe villains to be a cakewalk. It wasn't so easy. Suddenly, the earth shattered, fracturing her valor at the same time. Plates began to shift. Whatever didn't break apart had bent so that a colossal robot constructed to ward off testers could rise out of the ground. Applicants fled immediately. Kyoka was about to join them. But then she saw the brunette girl pinned under rubble from where the monstrous mechanism had excavated itself. The rumbling robot was about to roll over the collapsed contender with its treaded chain track. Kyoka closed her eyes, instinctively turning her head to look away so as not to witness the inbound gruesome accident. And then she heard it. The abrasive roar of a chainsaw that came before the scything rip of chattering steel. A grating rip of metal sheeting reverberated as the sharp piercing sound also stabbed into the gigantic golem. A shrill shriek of steel rang out as it was torn apart in a tumultuous frenzy. And even now, the cataclysmic caterwauling continues. There's no escape from the rampaging raucous that decimates the droid. The behemoth buckles as it's torn apart at the base, metallic fibers creaking and wires sparking with popping embers from where the steel shielding gets mauled. Screeching comes from the machine as though it's wailing in torment. Never had Kyoka in her entire life heard something so awful. Never had she seen something so awful either. When she opens her eyes, she sees it. Elongated saw blades slicked black with oil protrude from what looks like something straight out of hell, metal teeth tipped a dark shade of red. It takes Kyoka a moment to realize the blood came from the source of the chainsaw bars and not from the robot. Dried and crusted scarlet specks dot the bare chest of a boy's fit physique, a ripcord made of copper swaying from his sternum. The grotesque figure has a green motor for a head, engine parted at the mouth where fangs are bared, indicator lights glow a bright yellow hue, eyes fueled just as much as the chainsaw attached to the base of his head. Arms split down the middle allow for additional chainsaw bars that are being swung haphazardly at the automaton that he downed. Parts get thrashed around, the robot's innards coming loose from the consistent strident strikes of the saw blades. Steel squeals as the chainsaw's teeth grate against it, carving in downwards and then upwards. The malformed boy relentlessly hacks at the opposing metal, harsh noises and shrill sounds sending shockwaves through the beaten bot. Weakened whines escape the machine as it's chopped to its core. When the slasher severs anything remaining between him and the foe villain's power source, he skewers the apparatus heart. The chainsaws protruding from each of his arms stay embedded as he raises the core reactor out from its circuitry. In one fluid motion that serves as a fatal finishing move, he hoists the robot's key component over his head and begins dragging the chainsaw attached there downwards through the hardwiring. Despite how excruciating the devastating din was to her heightened sense of hearing and how hysterically horrified she was to watch the vicious slaying of the massive machine, Kyoka has to admit that it was a pretty fucking hardcore takedown. No matter the terrifying chainsaw visage and the savagery of the droid's disfigurement, the malformed boy had rescued the brunette girl that would have otherwise been crushed. Kyoka can't help but admire the heavy metal approach. She finds herself studying the stranger's appearance, blown away by how gnarly the destructive blades are. When her eyes roam to the boy's bare chest, a blush the same shade as the blood there begins to fade in. Kyoka's onyx eyes widen and the heat in her face subsides. She realizes there's blood. A lot more than before. Last time she checked, machines don't contain DNA in them. Which can only mean. A feverish feeling of queasiness overwhelms the girl, nearly making her double over with the urge to vomit. The major spillage of blood came from the boy, the severed parts of his arms and exposure of his head ripping flesh and skin tissue for the chainsaws to function. In order for the cutting mechanisms to operate, they constantly shred his own muscle fibers. The blood leakage is an extreme side effect of the liquid's utilization as fuel. It's no wonder that the boy's pigmentation has become pallid. He's lost a major amount of the vital body fluid. Kyoka studies him closer, seeing now that his body is trembling. Noticing the way that the fatigued figure wobbles on his shaky legs, Kyoka turns to call out for help. Her ear jacks sway with the pivotal motion of her head. It's hard to judge how loud she's shouting with her hearing still wounded, "Hey! Somebody!" But she doesn't need to worry about anyone not coming to her call since someone has already arrived, onyx eyes landing on a short-statured woman wearing a white coat that billows in the wind like a cape. If not made evident by the large syringe that the lady is using as a cane or the regular-sized needle poking out of a netted bun like a hairpin, Kyoka is confident that the senior is the school's nurse, judging by the way that she hands vitamin gummies to examinees. Relief settles through the girl's system when she sees her elder getting nearer. Her violet hair swishes with her ear jacks as she turns her head back towards the boy. Much to her awe, the demonic face is gone and the chainsaws have retracted. She figures a transformation must have taken place while she was looking away. In place of motorized metal is an unruly mess of green curls. Instead of yellow lights, there's an emerald glow to the boy's eyes. An otherwise plain face holds two sets of freckles that make up a diamond formation on each cheek. At first glance, the basic facial features would have her giving no second thought to the fellow teenager. However, she's been giving him more than a simple surreptitious peek. The girl may as well be ogling him, captivated by the shift in appearance from predatory ferocity to docile innocence. Staring at him for as long as she has to admit that she finds him kinda cute actually. A blush dusts Kyoka's cheeks, applying more pink than her makeup. The girl's stare isn't just drawn to the shirtless boy's face, but also his well-defined muscles. Her onyx eyes are bound to pop out of their sockets at the rate that they've been broadening. She realizes as the school nurse walks past her. Oh, no, he's hot. Kyoka only registers that she voiced her thoughts aloud when the nurse casts her a sidelong sly smile. The girl's ear jacks tangle themselves as she becomes flustered, worried that she may have also been heard by the boy himself. However, that doesn't seem to be a problem, considering he's fallen flat on his face, having passed out from blood loss and rendering himself unconscious. Kyoka winces, hoping he didn't land too hard and bruise his face. A's nurse tuts with each disapproving shake of her head. The elder woman prods the boy's body with her specialized cane, taking in his sorry state and formulating a diagnosis based on the mess. Another reckless kid with too much spunk, she sighs before crouching down to his level. Looks like I've found this year's Toshinori. Kyoka silently wonders which hero with that name could the experienced elder be referring to. The medical practitioner rolls the bloody body over before she plants a kiss on the unconscious boy's forehead. Through lip contact, the elder woman's quirk is able to heal people's injuries and illnesses. Kyoka catches on upon witnessing the ability in action. The lady was able to land her role as UA's nurse by being a heroine of her own. Kyoka finally recognizes the woman as Recovery Girl. But Recovery Girl is still much too occupied with tending to the boy who overexerted himself to notice Kyoka's starstruck stare. The old heroine uses her cane as a crutch to stand back up while medbots lift her patient up onto a gurney. She watches with censorious care as the boy stirs in his state of unconsciousness. What is it that man is always calling them? But upon closer examination, her gaze turns tender. Problem child. Sharing Recovery Girl's line of sight, Kyoka can't help but agree with the woman. This boy is going to cause a lot of problems. A strange chance occurrence. A peculiar behavioral habit. Or, for lack of a better term than those words, a quirk. Humans and animals alike began developing odd characteristics unique to them long ago. Superpowers. Abilities. It started in King City of China, where a baby manifested the astonishing meta capability to radiate light from its body. Now, a boy can sprout a tail. A girl could develop a pink skin pigmentation. As such, the orange dog the size of a bread loaf may as well have a chainsaw protruding from its cute little face. The dog's tail is much thinner than any other dog's, and yet, it wags just the same. It's without fur, a wire wrapped in leather that creates a swishing sound every time it takes a swipe at the air. Left, and then right. Back and forth. At the end of its tail is a handle too small for a hand to grab. It is, however, the right size for a child's pinky finger to slide through. It fits just like a ring on Izuku Midoriya's stubby appendage. It's not unnatural for animals to have quirks. After all, the principal of UA is an animal with above average human intelligence, and that's the most prestigious hero school in all of Japan. So, Izuku isn't afraid when he comes across the pastel orange dog with a chainsaw sticking out of its head. He's more so amazed by the prospect of a creature having a quirk. Especially when it's as interactive as using its tail like a pulley system to activate the chainsaw's movement. What is far more peculiar in this world, is that the young boy is without a quirk. Even the boy's appearance is rather plain, completed with a face full of freckles. The duality of the creature and Izuku Midoriya is evident so long as they're beside one another. That's what makes Izuku love the stray he stumbled upon even more. The dog to him is a discovery unlike any other. Luckily for the freckled child, the equally little critter has taken a liking to him as well. Curiosity twinkles in each of their eyes as they study each other. The bond between boy and dog begins just like every other. Izuku takes the stray home, hoping to convince his mother to allow him to keep it. He carries the orange mutt in his arms, presenting it like a piece of treasure. When Inko Midoriya sees the animal that her son has brought to her, she can't help but be wary of it. As a concerned mother, and an overprotective one at that, she already has ramifications about how dangerous it is having a literal chainsaw mounted to its head. Not to mention it's a wild animal, undomesticated for all she knows, with or without the chainsaw. Oh, Izuku, sweetie, she softens her tone to be as delicate as she can. She knows it'll be disappointing for him to hear that he can't keep it, so she plans to let him down easily, at the very least. Seeing how bright the green shimmers in his pleading puppy eyes though, Inko hesitates. Izuku hardly asks for anything. He's such a sweet boy, always kind to her and everyone he meets. Doesn't every boy deserve a pet? She wonders. Her reconsideration will have to be a carefully thought out one though. The last thing she wants is for her little Izuku to get hurt. Inko's eyes settle on the dog that her son is clutching tightly to his chest. Izuku clings to the animal like a lifeline, hugging it closely to his heart. The strange-colored critter gazes up at her, meeting her stare with as equally innocent eyes as her son. Its thin wire for a tail flicks back and forth, wagging happily in the Midoriya's company. Izuku did manage to carry the animal all the way home without harming himself. If the creature were truly dangerous as she fears, it would have likely already bitten or scratched him when being picked up. The chainsaw is pointed away from her son, the way he handles the dog extremely cautious. It's so difficult saying no to the combination of such a cute duo tag-teaming her with puppy eyes, one literally from a puppy. Inko sighs, unable to refuse her son's happiness by denying the welcoming of a new family member. That being said, she still has to keep her boy safe as his mother. If she's going to allow the animal to stay with them, there comes a small caveat. You can keep it. She pauses to let Izuku finish cheering before adding, but. Izuku cocks his head, ear catching the word before his brain registers that there's more. Only if it stays in the backyard. At least until we're able to bring it to a vet, Inko settles on the conditions she's presented. She's still uncertain of how safe the stray is and would like to proceed with caution. Izuku nods along, well-mannered and understanding, he accepts the compromise. Deal. He celebrates with a little hop before twirling the dog around in a giddy display of affection for it already. The small canine yaps along to his laughter, creating a happy symphony that has Inko giggling with them before long. Thanks, Mom. Izuku flashes a smile so bright that it'd be blinding to anyone unaccustomed to seeing it so often. Inko feels her cheeks lifting into an equally large smile. All right, she places a gentle hand on his head to hold him in place. It's tough raising a boy alone at such a rambunctious age. Go wash up now. Dinner will be ready soon. She steers him towards the bathroom and he sets the new family member down before running off. She suddenly realizes that their new pet will also need food. Kibble goes on the shopping list for tomorrow, but in the meantime, she heard that rice and eggs is perfectly edible for dogs. She prepares some to feed the canine her son brought home. Inko sighs to herself before adding to the list that she'll also need to pick up dog dishes. She supposes they'll also need to give it a dog collar and a name so she can call it something other than it. Inko will wait for her son to get back for that one. He's the one that brought the dog home in the first place. He should be the one to name it. Inko glances at the dog from her peripheral vision. It curled itself up in a small ball right where Izuku left it, waiting patiently for his return. At least it's well-mannered. She wonders if it happened to have a previous owner who had perhaps trained it to be. Inko tuts to herself as she clicks the pen to write another thing to add to her shopping list. The poor thing will need a doggy bed to lay in instead of on the floor. She glances out the window. The weather is warm enough that it should be fine sleeping outside just for tonight. Though she does feel bad making it do so. Inko adds a note to get a few chew toys and bones to make up for it. The rice cooker beeps to let her know that it's finished. Eggs don't take very long to scramble either. So the dog is served its meal long before the Midorius have theirs. When Inko squats down to set the bowl of food down, she takes the chance to get a closer look at the animal. Even with a chainsaw jutting out of its skull, it really is quite cute. The tiny creature timidly starts to eat its mixture of rice and eggs, drawing closer to the woman. Inko tilts her head to the side, green hair leaning with gravity. Studying the strange colored critter, she reaches out a hand to pet its fur. The dog doesn't flinch, growl, or snap. It allows her to run her fingers through its coat. So soft and sweet. It reminds her of her little Izuku and his fluffy hair. Oh crap. She's starting to love the animal just as much as her son. Inko chuckles, realizing that the decision to keep the dog as their pet was inevitable. When Izuku trots back to the kitchen, Inko stands up straight, trying to hide the fact that she was getting close to the dog. She clears her throat with a feigned cough while facing away from him, returning to the oven. So, Izuku, she hears him slide out a chair to sit down. What should we name our new little friend? Izuku hums as he tries to think of an answer, so loud that one might consider the noise obnoxious, but Inko knows better. How about Dog Might? He shouts his suggestion with childish pride. Inko tries to hold back a laugh, not sure how to help him cope with his hero worship or how she'll explain that such a ridiculous name is unsuitable. But she fortunately doesn't have to. Izuku looks down at the dog to see it looking up at him, meeting his gaze. He gauges the animal's reaction. Neither he or Inko are expecting the mutt to make a deadpan expression, complete with a sweet drop and all. Oh, you don't like that, boy? Izuku second guesses the name he's going to pick out. Inko pauses, realizing that her son has figured out the animal's gender somehow. She shakes her head. He's probably just guessing. Before Izuku can come up with another All Might-themed name, Inko blurts out her own suggestion. How about Pocky? It's a pretty common dog name, like Spot. Perhaps, even a bit plain. People have often called Izuku rather plain, so maybe Pocky is fitting for his pet. It'd be better than Dog Might, at the very least. Pocky. Izuku tests the name on his tongue. His face scrunches a little like the taste in his mouth is sour. He does a little reinventing of the kanji, Pochu. Pokia. Pokio, before finally settling on, how about Pokita? The dog perks up a bit, yapping in acknowledgement. Izuku's mouth goes agape in awe, eyes sparkling at the sight of his pet agreeing with his name's suggestion. You like Pokita? Izuku asks. The dog barks as though in confirmation. Pokita. Pokita. Pochita. Izuku cheers the name like a chant and the dog now deemed Pokita continues to bark in equal elation. And that's how the dog's name was decided. Pokita became a member of the Midoriya family that day. And the thing about Midoriyas is that they all have big affectionate hearts. So when Pokita is left outside to sleep in the backyard, Izuku for the first time goes against his mother's wishes. After he's sure that she has fallen asleep, he sneaks out of his room to let the dog in. SSSHH, his hushed whisper warns the dog not to bark as he tries not to get caught. Izuku's heart hammers in his chest. He's never been a rebellious child. Not like Kaken. He'd never broken the rules. Whatever his mom says, he respectfully does. But poor Pokita. Izuku couldn't just leave him outside to sleep all alone. Izuku lets the dog up onto his bed. From the higher vantage point, Pokita gets a good view of all the superhero merchandise that adorns the walls. The number one hero, All Might, smiles from all possible angles. Don't judge me. Izuku squirms in embarrassment once he gets beneath his All Might themed blankets. After Pokita does that dog thing where he spins in a few circles first, he settles into the bed with Izuku. The boy smiles as he closes his eyes, happy to be sharing the bed with his new friend. He's excited to introduce Kaken to the dog the next day, hoping his childhood friend will be as impressed as he is by the animal's quirk. Eventually, the two drift to sleep. Their slumber silent with very little snores. They would have not gotten caught if not for Inko being such a concerned mother. The protective mom pokes her head into the room to check on her son. She finds him nuzzled up against Pokita, the two of them sleeping with smiles. She sighs, not wanting to ruin the tender moment by waking him up. She figures she'll reprimand Izuku in the morning for going against the rules, but for now, she'll let the two bond. After all, this is only the start of the bond between a boy and his dog. Scarlet sneakers scuff solid concrete, the shabby shoes planting themselves firmly on the grounds of UA. Beneath the outsoles is a mess of petal confetti, the after-party of the school's entrance exam leaving a boy left in its wake. He lingers under the billowing cherry blossoms until a stronger breeze blows, the wind ruffling his green curls and knocking more of the sakura tree's corolla loose. Izuku Midoriya's viridescent gaze glimmers under the glow of a salmon sky as he's showered by the flower petals. Some of the fuchsia specks land on his t-shirt, the gentle descent coming to a sudden halt. It's one of the spare articles of clothing his mother made him pack in the flaxen knapsack that he has hoisted over his shoulder by a single strap. Izuku's grip on the band tightens when he recalls the reason for needing another set of attire in the first place. His transformation during the physical portion of the Hero School's exam comes to mind, his quirk's ability having shredded through his first outfit. The moppy mess called hair that resides atop of the boy's head sways when he tries shaking the memory of his metamorphosis from his mind. It helps him to forget when his green gaze settles on the familiar vehicle that's slowly pulling up to the school's gates. A soft smile stretches his freckled cheeks and he begins walking towards the car. Smoke wafts from the Nissan Versa's exhaust pipe, the engine's thrumming reminding Izuku of a familiar sound and forcing his smile down. He places a hand over the left side of his chest, feeling the wire underneath his shirt. The back and forth of introspection versus assuagement resettles on the person in the vehicle once she steps out. Inko Midoriya exits the car to greet her son at the school gate, worry written all over her expression. The greenit mother hurries over to her kid, wrapping him in a hug that puts the bear strength in, Mama Bear. Izuku wheezes as he gasps for air, his lungs crushed so long as he's caught in her grasp. My baby. They told me what happened. Are you okay? She ironically frets over his well-being despite being the cause of his current breathing problems. Once released from her embrace, Izuku finally manages to inhale enough oxygen so that he can speak. I'm fine, Mom. Recovery girl said that I'm fine. He stands up straight to show her that he's still completely intact as though that's proof of his good health. She critically eyes him up and down, searching for any scars or scrapes. When Inko is seemingly satisfied with her own diagnosis, she nods. If you say so, though she remains wary about the final verdict. She steps aside so that Izuku can throw his bag in the car's trunk. As the greenit ventures around the grille to return to the driver's side, she sneaks a glance at the prestigious hero school that her son applied to. You met Recovery Girl, huh? I wish it had been under better circumstances, but that must have been neat, and smiles while thinking how excited the hero otaku must have been to meet one of his idols. Izuku climbs into the passenger side, relishing in how soft the cushion is once his body sinks into the seat. The door slamming shut jars his memory of the eventful day he had so that he mimics her smile, yeah. And Present Mike was the one who read us all the rules, and Smentos was our proctor for the written part. That's great, Zuku, but... Inko interrupts her son to literally point out his lack of a safety strap via gesturing with her index finger. When he looks down at his lap, she feigns clearing her throat before correcting him to look up by flicking forward, seatbelt. Izuku jostles himself to sit up straight, grabbing onto the strap's clip fastener so that he can pull it down. Oh, right, he begins to tug on the line to make it work. Once it reaches across his chest, he locks it in place with a click. Sorry, he gives his mother an apologetic look before readjusting himself to get comfortable again. So, you were telling me about your day. Inko locks her own seatbelt into place before turning her keys in the car's ignition slot to switch on the engine. She gives her son a quick glance to let him know that she's still listening as she shifts the vehicle into gear. Izuku practically jumps in his seat with excitement upon being reminded of his glimpse at UA. Oh, yeah. He recalls how amazing the massive estate is with not just its main buildings, theater, auditorium, but also the entire mock city the school created just for the physical exam. He continues with his recollection of the time spent there vehemently. I met Recovery Girl last after I helped save a girl that was a girl. He doesn't expect his mother to slam roughly on the brakes. The car jolts to a stop before it even begins to move, safety strap tightening to hold him in place so that he doesn't go flying out the windshield. Izuku is suddenly very grateful that his mother told him to wear the seatbelt. Startled by the sudden halt of the vehicle, he glances at the car's driver with wide eyes. Mom. He verbally expresses his mixture of shock and confusion when he sees that she's sobbing. Sorry, Inko apologizes in a quavering voice while trying to wipe away her tears with the back of her hands. She sniffles as snot hangs from her nose, the crying becoming overwhelmingly hysterical. Izuku knows from experience that the waterworks are about to flood the car and drown him like a dam bursting. She can hardly get any words out, it's just. Inko watches through blurred vision as her son searches frantically in the glove compartment for a box of tissues. When Izuku finds nothing to dry her tears, his panic escalates and he fumbles with the door handle. Realizing that the child lock is in place, he has no choice but to resort to begging her not to turn the car into a death trap. Oh no, Mom, don't. My little Zuzu is growing up, but her wailing is like an alarm ringing to warn everyone on a ship that the boat is sinking. There's nothing to plug the leak as water starts to fill up the car's interior. Inko's delirious weeping threatens both of their lives until he manages to roll down the window. At the last second, he saves them from a flooded enclosed space. Izuku groans in exhausted exasperation. His fatigue turns him languid, his body sliding down the seat. He shakes his head with what little energy he has left to muster for the motion. It's not like that. After I rescued her is when I passed out. Inko pauses her dramatic sniveling, sinuses suddenly cleared. She has some sort of backlash reaction before doing a double take. Wait, this girl never thanked you. One of her eyebrows raises scrupulously and her tone changes tune. Izuku fidgets in place, his mother's hard gaze suddenly making him feel as though he's being watched closely under a microscope. He avoids her stare while trying to come up with an answer that'll keep both him and the girl that he saved off his mom's chopping block. Well, you're telling me that you never even got her name? Inko's obtrusive outburst startles Izuku just as much as when she slammed on the car's brakes. Seeing that his mother is on the verge of crying yet again, albeit for a different reason over her son's interaction with a girl this time, he's quick to shout over her too. Mom, would you just let me finish what I'm saying? He tries not to sound too desperate to get a sentence in, but his plea comes out as a whine anyways. The sudden cry surprises Inko just the right amount that it manages to snap her out of her delusional state of mind. You're right, she nods as she acknowledges how crazy she was acting. Inko shifts the car back into gear, mirroring her headspace returning to normal. As she starts to pull forward, she prompts her son to explain further. Sorry, Izuku. Continue. Izuku falters, partially because he hadn't expected her to actually let him talk and slightly due to the next part of his story. He anxiously fiddles with the cord under his shirt. When he finally settles on the right word, my quirk, he quells his nerves enough to say, I only passed out because I exceeded my runtime with my chainsaws while using it. Inko stiffens in her seat. As soon as she does, she tries hiding the discomposure by pretending to slouch. Oh, I see, she mulls over what her response will be very carefully. She knows that her son is watching her closely just as much as he's listening. Internally, the woman doesn't know whether to be relieved or not. She wasn't sure what she had thought when she heard her son had saved someone, but the usage of his quirk hadn't come to mind for whatever reason. Ultimately, her boy made a choice and it's up to her to support him should he choose to stand by it for the proper cause. You made the right decision, Izuku. Never doubt that. She spares him a quick glance so that he knows the matter is important enough for her to risk taking her eyes off the road for a moment. Izuku looks away, his gaze breaking contact from her and falling into his lap. I just moved on my own. His fingers curl around the fabric of his shorts until he has handfuls of the material bunched up in his palms. Whatever he's feeling transfers over to the touch of his chest. He raises one arm, placing a hand over his sternum where a wire resides. I didn't think. I just pulled on my cord. He feels a heartbeat as though it's still active. Inko pulls up to a red light, utilizing the opportunity as a chance to look over at her son and gauge his expression. If her motherly instinct weren't enough, she can see as clear as the day being lit by sunbeams with her eyes that he has a lot on his mind. You know, Izuku, I understand that kids stop caring about their parents at a certain age. But it's still rude not to ask your mother about her day too. She thinks that the best course of action is to change the subject. Once Izuku registers the drastic change in conversational topic, he's none the wiser to her strategy, mistaking the switch up for a revival of his mother's moodiness. Sorry, Mom. He stammers out an apology and awkwardly forces out a fake chuckle. So, how was your day? Inko rolls her eyes over her son's dramatics, not realizing that he takes after her. She knows better than to bore him with details about how she did laundry and cleaned the house all morning. So she decides now is as good a time as any to mention the supper situation. Well, I didn't really have the chance to start cooking dinner since the school called around that time. She notes her son's surprised reaction from her peripheral vision. Do you want to pick something up at the store? Then makes a turn with the steering wheel to head downtown. Izuku blinks as he processes the information coupled with her question. It takes him a moment for his brain to catch up with his words when he has a great epiphany of a solution. Can I get one of those pre-made katsudons? Inko casts her son a withering look through the reflection of the rearview mirror. You know those aren't healthy, though her tutting tone doesn't quite match her expression in the sense of sounding serious. Izuku takes it seriously anyways. Come on, please, serious enough that he puts his hands together in a begging gesture to go along with his whining. Inko has a difficult time stifling her laugh over how ridiculous he's being. Fine, she gives into the pleading puppy eyes that haven't changed since he was a baby. But just because this is a special occasion, his victorious smile is contagious and she thinks his spirits have been lifted high enough to venture back on topic to UA. How well do you think you did on the exam? But she reconsiders that thought when she hears him hesitate. She worries for the worst until he says, I'm not so sure. He scratches the back of his head as though he'll find the answer buried in his thick curls of hair. I guess we'll find out. She shoots him a sidelong stare, seeing that he's taken to watching other cars whiz by outside the window. I mean, you have to have some idea of how you did. She tests her luck by attempting to pry a little more in case he's trying to hold out on her for some reason. Good, I guess, but his demeanor continues to droop the more that she persists, probably the same as anyone else. He shrugs non-committally before reaching over to turn up the volume dial on the system head unit. Can we turn on the radio? Present Mike's podcast is starting soon. Inko opens her mouth to say something more, but closes it just as quickly. Her son has already raised the audio too loud for them to continue talking. So, she relents and whispers more so to herself, yeah. Okay, sure. Like the continuous spin of the car's tires, Inko's mind does loops as it tries to figure out why her child has become so despondent. The gentle rise and fall of the road beneath the vehicle does little to soothe her as she overthinks. Part of her hopes that present Mike will mention UA's entrance exam, but the other side of her knows that she needs the radio as a distraction just as much as Izuku does. The Heroes podcast usually consists of jokes that are good for easing any sort of tension. With how increasingly frustrated she's becoming due to so many people cutting into her lane without turn signals, Inko figures she could use a wisecrack or two. Yesterday, I caught the sinister villain, Bomber Bear, and couldn't help thinking to myself. Present Mike's voice transmits through the radio and already captivates Izuku's interest at the mention of hero work. Inko can't help but listen closely as well, intrigue getting the better of her. past experience from tuning into the podcasts, leaving her in anticipation of a punchline. What do you call a bear without ears? B. The joke's landing is a bit rough at first, but both Midorius wind up howling with laughter once they comprehend the humor behind it. Inko is grateful for the dumb gag, her stress already alleviated. Suddenly, exams and quirks seem like less of a hassle than they originally were. If her son, who's on the direct receiving end, has already forgotten about those issues, then she can too, for his sake if not her own. Inko instead focuses on her first and foremost priority, which is being a mother, and that means feeding her boy. The woman turns into the parking lot of a grocer with the idea that they can quickly run in. It's hard for her to find a space at this hour, so she pulls alongside the front entrance. I'll be right behind you if somebody pulls out of a spot, but wait right here if you finish first. Inko reaches over the headrest of her chair to grab the purple purse she keeps in the backseat. There's just enough yen in her pocketbook to afford a frozen meal. Go to self-checkout and only buy your katsudon. No candy or treats, young man. The boy's mother withholds the money from his reach until she finishes giving him instructions. Once he stops rolling his eyes and nods in agreement with her laying of ground rules, only then does she allow him to have it. What about you? He pauses halfway out the door to look back when he realizes his mom didn't request anything for herself. The yen that the boy is holding suddenly feels light in his very heavy hand. Inko closes her eyes with her smile, concealing the chagrin of not being able to afford something for herself. I'll just have leftovers, sweetie. She then tries shooing him out of the car before he can see through the facade. Now hurry along. Izuku turns his face away, hiding his rueful expression from her as he gets out of the vehicle. He's seen the overdue bills piled up on the kitchen counter to know his father's checks haven't been covering their finances anymore. He's well aware of her monetary problems. Though, his mother doesn't know that. He knows better than to say anything to her should he spare her the shame. And yet, he still feels guilty as he goes to spend her hard-earned yen for himself. As Izuku's threadbare sneakers slap the store's tiled floor, he begins weighing his options with the money in his hand. The boy figures there may be some yen left over if he buys the cheaper stuff. Grocers sometimes keep expiring meals at the back of the shoppy with marked down prices. Each aisle he passes has something different. There's fruit, veggies, bread, canned goods, and finally at the end is when he reaches the discounted stock. Shelves with different microwavable meals give him his own variety of food to select from. Izuku lucks out and breathes a sigh of relief when he finds a box of katsudon. Except, when the boy reaches for it, someone's hand brushes up against his own. He realizes when he sees nails painted in a coat of purple polish that it's a soft, yet firm, feminine hand. Retracting his own hand like the girl's fingers were the fangs of a serpent that tried to bite him, Izuku yelps in disconcertment. He feels his face heating up in embarrassment, turning as bright red as his shoes by now. The boy's mild case of gynophobia really takes hold when he sees the rest of the girl. The hand that touched his own is connected to a fair-skinned teenager that must share his age. She's so petite that it's cute, her violet hair short the same as her height, and he can't help but be captivated by her triangular eye shape. What really amazes him about the girl is how cables hang from her lobes like earrings. He places his hand over his chest, feeling his own cord extension from his body and sensing a kindred spirit in that odd sense. He also feels the rapid rhythm of his heart trying not to explode from pumping so much blood all at once. As for how the girl responds to the accidental contact, her initial instinct is to apologize for startling him so badly. However, she too feels an extreme amount of shock when she sees how the boy looks. She recognizes him from the entrance exam and blurts out, "Chainsaw Boy," before she can stop herself. The hand that touched said Chainsaw Boys flies over her mouth to stifle the words that already came out. A blush of her own, though not as extreme as Izuku's, fades in as a pink hue to shadow her cheeks. Izuku sobers up when he hears the way that she referred to him. Wait. He does a double take before making sure he heard her correctly. "What did you call me?" And that reaction from him only embarrasses the girl even more, her blush darkening. Hesitantly, a muffled whisper comes from behind her hand, "Chainsaw Boy." After a moment of blinking at one another, both failing to gauge the other, the girl bows and shouts, "I'm sorry." Izuku jumps in place, startled by her a second time. She winces before toning her voice down, "That's not your name," and remains tentative about what she says. is it? Izuku stands there staring at her dumbfounded like a fool, blinking a few more times for extra measure to make sure the girl is real and that this is actually happening. When he realizes that the gradually growing silence between them is becoming awkward, he shakes his head to both answer her question and jumpstart his mouth. No, it's not. A weak laugh slips out on its own before he introduces himself with a small bow. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I'm Kyoka Jiru. The girl returns the gesture as she laughs along. Now that the strange tension between them has subsided, she loosens up a little. Sorry again, for the whole chainsaw boy thing. And startling you, Kyoka twirls one of her ear jacks so that it wraps around her finger the same way one would normally play with their hair. No, it's fine. Izuku fans away her apology with each of his frantically flapping hands. But still lingers on the matter to an extent, rubbing the nape of his neck nervously while wondering aloud, just. How do you know about? Kyoka raises an eyebrow when he doesn't finish his sentence. The chainsaws, she tries concluding it for him when she realizes that he doesn't plan on saying the rest. He sheepishly nods in response. Dude, we were at the same test site during the UA entrance exam. It was literally today. You didn't notice me. Her hands go on her noticeably curvaceous hips and Izuku can't help but follow the motion with his eyes. I don't know how I could have missed you. His mouth moves on its own to convey his thoughts. He realizes after the matter of speaking that he's being lewd and diverts his gaze to the ceiling in an attempt to cover his tracks. The tomato-faced blush returns full swing. Fortunately for him, Kyoka misinterprets his response as a regular reply. Well, you were pretty occupied with taking down the 0-pointer and saving that other girl. She recalls his shirtless rescue and blushes while thinking of her own semi-lewd thoughts. Anybody would have done the same in my position. Izuku tries brushing away her praise with one hand while bashfully running the other hand through his bushy green mess of hair. Are you kidding? Kyoka looks at him incredulously. Everyone else ran off like a bunch of pansies. She shocks Izuku with her terminology and zeal. You were the only one rockin' enough to actually be a hero like we're trying to become. He worries that he'll faint in front of her again due to how much blood keeps rushing up to his face. Oh, thanks, I guess. Izuku tries staring down at the floor to avoid facing the influx of emotions that he's feeling. He's not used to such praise, and from a girl no less. Heck, he's surprised that he's even lasted this long talking to one in general. By the way, are you doing alright? Kyoka's question snaps him out of his musings and causes him to look back up at her with confusion. He tries not to scrunch up his face too much as he tries to figure out what she means. He does a poor job. Seeing the boy's bewilderment, Kyoka elaborates a little. I was also in Recovery Girl's office afterwards and you didn't wake up the entire time that I was there. Oh, that. Izuku's eyes almost pop out of his head from how large his epiphany is. I'm fine. Just some quirk overuse backlash. He gestures towards his face with his hands as if she hadn't noticed the lack of bloody oil-soaked chainsaws until now. Then he thinks about what else she said and asks, wait, what were you in there for? Kyoka wavers, suddenly self-conscious about herself the same way that he had been. Oh, I have pretty sensitive ears, so, she shyly twists and untwists the jacks hanging from her lobes before explaining, you kinda did a number on my hearing when you went all chainsaw massacre on the 0-pointer. Izuku feels like he's been struck across the face. Or maybe stabbed in the chest. Both. He feels both. He holds his hands out in front of himself, unsure of what to do with them. Realizing that he's just standing there and hasn't apologized, he bends down to his waist to bow. Oh no, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. It's okay. I'm fine now too. Really, it's alright, but Kyoka interrupts him with a mimicry of Izuku's earlier frantic double hand wave. Just, keep that in mind the next time you decide to transform. She winces at the memory of the sound but tries to assure him with a delicate smile that it's okay anyways. Izuku looks up at her, confused yet again. Next time. Do you not think you did well enough on the exam to get in? Kyoka tilts her head to the side in mutual miscommunication. She then tilts her head upwards as she thinks, I'm pretty sure I, at least, racked up about 30 of the 3-pointers. Realizing Kyoka is talking about the score required to get accepted into the hero school, Izuku's shoulders slump with sorrow. He hadn't told his mom why guessing the exam results was such a touchy topic for him during the drive to the store, but he supposes it doesn't hurt to discuss the matter with a fellow examinee. I didn't, transform, until the end. He unconsciously places a hand over the string that dangles from his sternum under his shirt. Both of Kyoka's brows raise in a mixture of surprise and confusion. Dude, really, why not? She finds herself taking a step back in an attempt to better assess the boy's downtrodden demeanor. Izuku looks away, avoiding eye contact. His fingers trace the cord under the fabric of his shirt as he tries thinking of a good response for her. After a moment, he gives her a half-hearted shrug and mumbles, I dunno. Seeing how uncomfortable he is, Kyoka decides not to pry any further. Well, that's a bummer. She crosses her arms and tries cheering him up instead. I think you would have made a pretty hardcore hero. Thanks. Izuku cracks a small smile after hearing her say that. The hand hovering over his chest falls away, hanging in front of him next. Most people don't say that about my quirk. His fingers curl in to cover his open palm and form a fist before he looks up from it to return her sentiment, but you seem pretty, rockin' too. Flabbergasted by the boy using her own terminology on her, Kyoka turns as stiff as a board painted red. Rockin'. Shush, shut it. Her ear jacks start twisting around each other and the flush-faced girl has to struggle not to let them get tangled. Sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. Izuku begins to match her state of panic minus her quirk's ear extensions intertwining. The blushing and stammering mess of a boy hides his face behind his hands. Seeing that he's just as embarrassed, Kyoka spares him from getting jabbed by the jacks she finally manages to straighten out. Whatever, she tries to play the moment off by holding out her cell phone for him to take. Here. Surprised to see the gesture, Izuku spreads his hands just enough to peek out and look at the foreign object. The case is bedazzled with musical notes and has a glittery effect. He looks up from it to her with a perplexed stare. Kyoka shakes the hand holding the phone to urge him on. Your phone number. Put it in so we can keep chatting, but avoids meeting his gaze out of lingering embarrassment. Izuku realizes what she intended then and takes the phone from her to put in his contact. While he's at it, he inputs her phone number into his cell as well. While he's busy looking at the phone screens, Kyoka chances a glance in his direction to take in his appearance. Now that the boy isn't covered in blood and has his complexion back, he's even handsomer than he was before. He also has a cool sense of style. Kyoka stifles a giggle when she reads the small fonted kanji text that simply reads, T-shirt. It really is just an otherwise normal white short-sleeve top that he's got on. Nice shirt, she compliments him with a nod. Thanks. Izuku hands the girl her phone back as he returns the nod, I like yours too. Forgetting which outfit she picked out for that day, Kyoka looks down at herself to see how she dressed. The top she chose is a purple tee with bolded English text that says, Deep Dope, in yellow, but the catch is that the P on the end extends into an arrow that points down to her crotch. A blush so radical that it covers her entire face overwhelms her. Perv. And she snatches the box of katsudon off the shelf between them before hurrying away. Just as she's about to round the corner, she pauses to shout over her shoulder, You'd better text me. And poor Izuku is left discombobulated by the girl's sudden reaction. Not only did he receive mixed signals, but he had his dinner stolen from him. He stretches out an arm as though he's reaching for the girl and his food. Wait. What? But ultimately surrenders to common sense, being that there is no sense to what just happened. Suddenly, an eerie aura starts to creep up behind the boy. Who was that nice, sweet, kind, gorgeous girl? Zuko. His mother materializes seemingly out of thin air behind him to be the world's biggest jump scare. Izuku screams, Mom, how long have you been standing there? He feels faint after a violent vertigo assault on his mind from how she just magically appeared. Long enough. Inko smirks as she folds her arms over one another. Now tell me how long until I get my grandchildren, Zuko. When do I get to meet her or her parents? The atmosphere becomes heavier as she somehow increases her aura's output. The overwhelming motherly force nearly crushes Izuku from how strong the amount of pressure is. The poor boy almost falls to his knees, legs wobbling as he struggles to remain standing in retaliation of the weight against him. She's just a friend, he cries out in a desperate Hail Mary attempt to stop his mom from smothering him in her emanating aura. Fortunately for him, the effort works and the dense fog lifts. He's able to breathe again, heavy intakes of air, as he bends forward with his hands on his knees. My little Zuzu is just friends with a Jill. Inko squeals with delight as she does a celebratory dance that has her wiggling in place. She's completely oblivious to her son's suffering as she commemorates the milestone in his life. Once Izuku has finally recovered enough oxygen to speak again, he forces himself to stand up straight and tries to stop her from embarrassing him any further. Moom. But there's a small smile that graces his lips despite his protests to her happiness. He too feels like celebrating, even if he'd never admit it. After all, Kyoka-jiru is his first friend since he lost Pokita. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.